Media, English Channel. Vatican 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 Media 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 English Channel. Vatican Media
Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ. Welcome to this live broadcast from inside the Vatican's Paul VI Hall this Monday, May 12th. Pope Leo XIV is expected to meet this morning with representatives of the media who were in Rome to cover the conclave that elected him Pope on May 8th. My name is Devin Watkins, and I'll be providing the commentary and translation for this papal event. As we begin this broadcast, we see the Paul VI Hall has been filled with media representatives, media professionals who are covering the conclave. We're still waiting for Pope Leo to come out and to greet those professionals who have covered from the election of Pope Francis, from the death of Pope Francis, and have stayed on to cover the conclave and his election in these first days of his papacy. From wherever you are joining us, I would like to welcome you to this live broadcast. Some of you may be joining us through various Vatican media channels, perhaps the Vatican News app or the Radio Vaticana app, the Vatican News web portal, or Vatican News English YouTube channel, or our Facebook Live feed. We also welcome all of you who are joining us through our partner broadcasting stations who are picking up this broadcast, including Madha TV in India, EWTN TV, Catholic Faith Network in America, UCTV, Uganda Catholic Television, Shalom World Television Networks, USA, Atmadarshan TV, Catholic TV, and Luminous Radio in India. We also welcome all of you who are joining us on local diocesan broadcasting radio stations, and a warm welcome to all of our friends from the Deaf Catholic Youth Initiative for the Americas, DCYIA. And for this event and for many others, please visit our Vatican News YouTube channel to find translation in American Sign Language, or ASL. As we await Pope Leo XIV's arrival here in the Paul VI Audience Hall, we can go back through these first few days of his pontificate. He was elected just on May 8th, only 4 days ago, the evening of May 8th. For his first trip outside of the Vatican, he did that on Saturday. Pope Leo chose to visit the shrine of the Mother of Good Counsel in Genazzano, just outside of Rome. That afternoon, which was less than 48 hours after his election as Pope, he traveled to the shrine that has been run by the Augustinians since 1200. Pope Leo, who was born Robert Francis Prevost, visited that shrine as a cardinal when he was the prefect of the dicastery for bishops just over a year ago in April 2024. He celebrated Mass there. In his homily on that event, the then cardinal expressed his devotion to the Virgin Mary and urged the faithful to be inspired by Mary to spread peace and reconciliation in the world. The shrine is home to an ancient image of the Virgin Mary, which comes from Skåder in Albania, and the image was much loved by Pope Leo XIII. Pope Leo XIV, the other day, explained that he had taken his name from, in the line of Pope Leo XIII, who was the first pope to write a social encyclical, a papal letter dedicated to social issues called Rerum Novarum. At the time, the popes were prisoners of the Vatican upon their election. This was between the 1860s to 1930s. And so he never had the chance to visit. And we hear the applause, and Pope Leo XIV comes out onto the stage here in Paul VI Hall. sustained applause for our Holy Father from those who have covered his every move since his election, moment by moment in these few days.
Buongiorno, good morning, and thank you for this wonderful reception. They say when they clap at the beginning, it doesn't matter much. If you're still awake at the end and you still want to applaud, thank you very much. Fratelli e sorelle, do il benvenuto a voi, rappresentanti dei media di tutto il mondo. Vi ringrazio per il lavoro che avete fatto e state facendo in questo tempo, che per la Chiesa è essenzialmente un tempo di grazia.
Brothers and sisters, I welcome you, representatives of the media from around the world. Thank you for the work you have done and continue to do in these days, which is truly a time of grace for the Church. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus proclaimed, "Blessed are the peacemakers." This is a beatitude that challenges all of us, but it is particularly relevant to you, calling each one of you to strive for a different kind of communication, one that does not seek consensus at all costs, does not use aggressive words, does not follow the culture of competition, and never separates the search for truth from the love with which we must humbly seek it. Peace begins with each one of us, in the way we look at others, listen to others, and speak about others. In this sense, the way we communicate is of fundamental importance. We must say no to the war of words and images. We must reject the paradigm of war.
Permettetemi allora di ribadire oggi la solidarietà della Chiesa.
Let me therefore reiterate today the Church's solidarity with journalists who are imprisoned for seeking and reporting the truth, while also asking for their release.
E con queste parole anche chiedere la liberazione di questi giornalisti incarcerati.
And with these words also ask for these imprisoned journalists' release.
La Chiesa riconosce in questi testimoni.
The Church recognizes in these witnesses, I'm thinking of those who report on war, even at the cost of their lives, the courage of those who defend dignity, justice, and the right of people to be informed, because only informed individuals can make free choices.
La sofferenza di questi giornalisti
The suffering of these imprisoned journalists challenges the conscience of nations and the international community, calling on all of us to safeguard the precious gift of free speech and of the press. Thank you, dear friends, for your service to the truth.
Voi siete stati a Roma in queste settimane per raccontare
You have been in Rome these past few weeks to report on the Church, her diversity, and at the same time her unity. You were present during the liturgies of Holy Week, and then reported on the sorrow felt after the death of Pope Francis.
avvenuta
which
però nella
nevertheless
luce della Pasqua.
took place in the light
Quella
of
stessa
Easter.
fede pasquale ci ha
That
introdotti
same
nello
Easter
spirito del
faith
conclave,
drew us into the
che
spirit of
vi
the
ha visti
conclave,
particolarmente impegnati
during
in
which you worked
giornate
long
faticose.
and tiring
E
days.
anche in questa
Yet
occasione
even on this
siete
occasion,
riusciti a
you
narrare la
managed to
bellezza
recount the
dell'amore di
beauty of
Cristo
Christ's love
che ci unisce
that
tutti e
unites
ci fa
and
essere
makes
un
us
unico
one people,
popolo guidato dal buon
guided
pastore.
by the Good Shepherd.
Viviamo
We are living in
tempi
times that are
difficili da
both difficult to
percorrere e da
navigate and to
raccontare,
recount.
che rappresentano una
They
sfida per
present
tutti
a
noi e
challenge
che
for all
non
of us,
dobbiamo
but it is one that
fuggire.
we should not run away
Al
from.
contrario,
On the
essi
contrary,
chiedono a
they
ciascuno
demand that
nei
each
nostri
one of us,
diversi ruoli
in
e
our different
servizi,
roles and
di non
services,
cedere mai
never
alla
give in to
mediocrità.
mediocrity.
La Chiesa deve
The Church
accettare la
must
sfida
face
del tempo
the
e allo
challenges
stesso
posed by
modo
the times.
non possono
In the
esistere
same
una
way,
comunicazione, un
communication
giornalismo
and
fuori dal
journalism
tempo e
does
dalla
not
storia,
exist outside of
come ci
time and
ricorda
history.
Sant'Agostino che
St.
diceva:
Augustine reminds us of this
viviamo
when he
bene
said,
e i tempi
"Let
saranno
us live
buoni.
well, and the
Noi
times will be
siamo i
good."
tempi.
We are the
Grazie
times.
dunque di Grazie dunque di
Thank
quanto
you,
avete
therefore,
fatto per
for what you
uscire
have done
dagli
to
stereotipi e
move
dai luoghi
beyond the
comuni
stereotypes and
attraverso i
cliches
quali leggiamo
through which we
spesso la vita
often
cristiana e la
interpret
stessa vita della Chiesa.
Christian life and the life
Grazie perché
of the
siete
Church
riusciti a
itself.
cogliere l'essenziale di quel che siamo
Thank you
e a
because you have
trasmetterlo
captured the
con ogni
essence of who
mezzo
we
al
are
mondo intero.
and conveyed it to the whole world through every
Oggi una
form of
delle
media
sfide più
possible.
importanti è quella di promuovere una comunicazione capace di farci uscire dalla torre di
Today, one of the
Babele,
most
in
important
cui
challenges
talvolta ci
is to
troviamo
promote
dalla
communication
confusione
that
di
can bring us out
linguaggi
of the Tower
senza
of
amore,
Babel,
spesso
in which we sometimes find
ideologici o
ourselves,
faziosi.
out of the confusion of loveless languages that are often ideological or
Perciò
partisan.
il vostro servizio, con le parole
Therefore,
che
your
usate,
service,
lo stile che
with the words you
adottate, è
use and the style you
importante.
adopt,
La
is
comunicazione
crucial.
infatti non è solo
As you know,
trasmissione di
communication is not
informazione,
only the
ma è
transmission of
creazione di una
information,
cultura,
but it
di
is also
ambienti
the
umani
creation of
e
a culture
digitali che
of
diventino
human and
spazi di
digital
dialogo e di
environments
confronto.
that become
E
spaces for
guardando
dialogue
all'evoluzione
and discussion.
tecnologica,
In
questa
looking at how
missione
technology
diventa
is
ancora
developing,
più
this mission
necessaria.
becomes ever more
Penso in
necessary.
particolare all'intelligenza artificiale col suo
I'm thinking in
potenziale
particular
immenso,
of artificial
che
intelligence
richiede però
with its immense potential,
responsabilità e
which nevertheless
discernimento per
requires
orientare gli
responsibility
strumenti al
and
bene di
discernment
tutti,
in order to
così che
ensure that it can
possano
be used for
produrre
the good of
benefici
all,
per l'umanità.
so that it can
E questa
benefit all of
responsabilità riguarda
humanity.
tutti in
This
proporzione
responsibility
all'età
concerns
e ai
everyone
ruoli
in
sociali.
proportion to his or her age and
Cari
role
amici,
in society.
impareremo con il tempo a conoscerci meglio.
Dear
Abbiamo
friends,
vissuto,
we will get to know
possiamo
each
dire
other better
insieme,
over time.
giorni
We
davvero
have experienced,
speciali.
we can say
Li
together, truly
avete
special
condivisi
days.
con ogni mezzo di
We have shared them
comunicazione,
through every form
la
of media,
televisione, la radio, il
TV,
web, i
radio,
social.
internet, and social
Vorrei
media.
tanto che ognuno di
I
noi
sincerely hope that
potesse dire di
each of
essi
us
che
can
ci hanno
say that
svelato
these
un
days
pizzico del
unveiled a
mistero
little bit
della
of the
nostra
mystery of our
umanità
humanity
e che ci hanno
and left
lasciato un
us with a
desiderio
desire
di amore e
for
di
love
pace.
and peace.
Per questo,
For this
ripeto a voi
reason,
oggi,
I repeat to you
l'invito
today
fatto dal Papa
the
Francesco nel suo
invitation
ultimo
made by
messaggio
Pope
per la
Francis in
prossima
his
giornata
message for
mondiale delle
this year's
comunicazioni
World Day of
sociali.
Social Communications.
Disarmiamo la
Let us
comunicazione da ogni
disarm
pregiudizio,
communication of
rancore,
all
fanatismo
prejudice
e
and
odio.
resentment,
Purifichiamola
fanaticism, and even
dall'aggressività.
hatred.
Non
Let us free
serve
it from
una
aggression.
comunicazione fragorosa,
We do not need
muscolare,
loud, forceful
ma piuttosto
communication,
una
but rather
comunicazione
communication
capace
that
di
is capable
ascolto,
of
di
listening
raccogliere la
and of
voce dei
gathering the
deboli
voices
che
of the
non
weak
hanno
who
voce.
have no voice.
Disarmiamo le
Let
parole,
us disarm words.
disarmiamo le parole e
Let us disarm words,
contribuiremo
and
a
we will
disarmare
help
la
to
terra.
disarm the world.
Una comunicazione disarmata e
Disarmed
disarmante ci
and
permette di
disarming
condividere uno
communication
sguardo
allows us to
diverso sul
share
mondo
a
e di
different
agire
view
in
of the
modo
world and to
coerente con la
act in a
nostra
manner
dignità
consistent with
umana.
our human dignity.
Voi siete in prima
You
linea
are at the
nel
forefront
narrare i
of reporting on
conflitti e le speranze
conflicts
di
and
pace, le
aspirations for
situazioni
peace,
di
on
ingiustizia e
situations
di
of
povertà
injustice and poverty,
e il lavoro
and on the
silenzioso di
silent work of
tanti per un
so
mondo
many people
migliore.
striving to
Per
create a better
questo
world.
vi
For
chiedo di
this reason,
scegliere
I
con
ask you to choose
consapevolezza e
consciously
coraggio
and
la
courageously
strada di
the path
una
of communication
comunicazione di pace.
in favor of peace.
Grazie a tutti voi,
Thank you,
che Dio vi
and may
benedica.
God bless you.
Dominus vobiscum. Sit nomen Domini benedictum. Adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini. Benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater et Filius et Spiritus Sanctus. Amen. Tante grazie.
Thank you very much, said Pope Leo XIV after he offered his apostolic blessing to the media professionals gathered here in the Paul VI Hall. And now the Holy Father will come down the steps. And he first takes a drink of water, and as he goes to meet and greet the journalists gathered here in the Paul VI Hall. It's, as he said himself, it's been an intense few days here in and around near the Vatican. Many things have taken place since that fateful Easter Monday when Pope Francis died at around 7 in the morning. The Holy Father is greeting the prefect of the Dicastery for Communication, Paolo Ruffini, and Monsignor Lucio Ruiz, the secretary of the Dicastery, Andrea Tornielli, and our editorial director, Andrea Monda, the director of the Osservatore Romano, Natasha Kovekar, director of the Theological Pastoral Department of the Dicastery for Communication, as well as all of the other dignitaries and guests present for this event. Among the many events that Pope Leo has already carried out in these 4 days, on Sunday morning, May 11th, Pope Leo visited the Vatican grottos in private to celebrate Mass at the altar near the tomb of St. Peter. The Holy See Press Office said that morning that the Mass was concelebrated by Father Alejandro Moral Anton, the Prior General of the Order of St. Augustine, of which Pope Leo was a member. He was also served 2 terms as the Prior General himself of the Augustinians, and even in his first words on the balcony, the central balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, just a few minutes after his election, he mentioned that he is an Augustinian, a son of St. Augustine. We heard in his speech just now that he quoted St. Augustine. I imagine that we will be seeing the eminent theologian show up frequently in his speeches. And in his homily, Pope Leo, for the Mass on Sunday morning in the Vatican grottos, he spoke about what he called a particularly significant Sunday. He spoke first in English and then in Italian, and reflected on the gospel of the Good Shepherd. As he begins his new Petrine ministry, he said he looked to the example of Jesus and the one whom we depend on. The day was also the World Day of Prayer for Vocations. He addressed that theme and recalled that the topic featured prominently during the recent meetings of the cardinals, the general congregations that were held both before and after his election. All of us, he said, must search together, first and foremost by giving a good example in our lives with joy, with living the joy of the gospel, not discouraging others, but rather looking for ways to encourage young people to hear the voice of the Lord and to follow it and to serve the church. He greeted, and he noted that the cardinals spoke prominently and frequently about it during their general congregations. In his homily on Sunday, Pope Leo also spoke about the universal call to proclaim the gospel, and he urged the faithful, "Take heart, don't be afraid." Acknowledging that the mission sometimes involves sacrifice, he emphasized how essential it is to listen to God's word and to one another. After the Mass, Pope Leo XIV spent time in prayer at the tombs of his predecessors. He also paused before the niche of the pallia, the woolen stoles that symbolize the unity between the Pope and the metropolitan archbishops around the world. That unity emerging and peace emerging as central themes of his just begun pontificate. And with that applause, we conclude this live broadcast of Pope Leo XIV's meeting with media professionals. Please visit the Vatican News web portal, Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube accounts for coverage of today's event and other Vatican and world news. We will be back again live on Wednesday in 2 days when the Pope will lead the general audience from St. Peter's Square. On behalf of Vatican Media, I would like to thank our in-studio audio technician and our audio coordinator and all of our media partners and on TV and radio who have made this broadcast possible. And thank you for joining us. A blessed day to you all. Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ.